The night was quiet, but not peaceful, the kind of quiet that makes the ticking of a wall clock sound like a hammer striking steel. I was sitting on my couch, the glow of the television flickering against the living room walls, when I heard again the soft creak of my front porch, a sound I had learned to dread, because it meant only one thing: she was back. My pulse quickened. I leaned forward, careful not to breathe too loudly. The outline of a figure moved across the frosted glass of my front door, a shadow shifting side to side, as though it owned the threshold of my home. My jaw clenched, because I already knew who it was: Kerren. She had the kind of confidence only ignorance could breed. She was my neighbor, but called herself a neighborhood guardian. Her perfume lingered even before she opened her mouth, a nauseating mix of powder and synthetic roses that always announced her arrival. She wore her usual bright pink jogging suit, even at night, like a beacon of arrogance. I rose from the couch, moved silently toward the door, and pressed my eye against the peephole. Sure enough, she was there, one hand rummaging through that oversized purse she carried everywhere, the other hand resting brazenly on my doorknob. I felt my chest tighten. It was not the first time she had done this. I opened the door just enough to make her flinch. "What do you think you are doing?" I asked. My voice was low, flat, filled with more exhaustion than anger. Her eyes widened, but only for a second before narrowing again. She smirked. "I was just checking if you got any packages," she said with a false sweetness of spoiled fruit. "You never know what strangers might try to steal around here." Strangers, that was her favorite word, a word she spat at me. Whenever she could, my skin color, my presence, my very existence in this neighborhood counted as strange to her. She did not even bother to hide it anymore. "You do not live here," I said firmly, "and you do not get to check anything." She tilted her head, laughed under her breath, and turned as if she were the victim being shooed away. "The nerve of you." She muttered, "I will be speaking to the HOA again about this." I closed the door, locked it, and stood there breathing hard, staring at the deadbolt. I could hear her footsteps fading, but the unease stayed. That was not the first time, and deep down I knew it would not be the last. The first time I caught her, it was almost laughable. I had come home from work and found her crouched on my porch fiddling with my doormat. She claimed she was making sure no one had left trash there, a ridiculous excuse, but harmless enough, or so. I thought. The second time she actually opened the front door and stepped inside. When I demanded she leave, she said she had every right, because she was ensuring the neighborhood stayed safe, my neighborhood, my house. My door frame, none of it mattered to her. I called the police that night. They came, listened, nodded, and then walked over to her house, where she cried big crocodile tears. She said I was threatening her. She said she was just a concerned neighbor. They left without doing a thing, and I was left with the realization that my word against hers meant nothing. After that, the incidents only grew bolder. Packages went missing from my porch, items in my mailbox were gone, once even a bill for my utilities. She wandered through my backyard one afternoon when I happened to be home. She claimed she was checking for stray animals. She always had an excuse, always an answer, but never guilt. Every time I confronted her, she twisted the story. She smiled her smug smile, tilted her chin up, and told me I was overreacting. She painted herself as a protector and me as the intruder. That was a narrative she was feeding the neighborhood, and people were starting to believe it. One evening, I stood on the porch staring at the marks of mud on my entryway. Kerren had broken in again, this time tracking filth across the mat. I caught her in the act. She stood there, her hand on the frame, her sneakers caked with dirt. When I shouted at her, she did not back down. Instead, she hurled words so sharp they cut deeper than her trespass. She called me a thief, called me unfit to live in this neighborhood. She spat out that I should go back to where I came from. Her voice was shrill, vicious, ringing through the night. The police came again, and once again she played the fragile flower. They told me to calm down. They said neighbors sometimes misunderstand each other, but there was no misunderstanding. I was being harassed, invaded, disrespected in my own home. That night, I sat in the dark, staring at the doorframe. My anger trembled like a kettle on the verge of boiling over every option. I had tried civility, security cameras, phone calls to the authorities had failed. She was bold because she thought nothing could touch her. She believed she could break into my house and walk away untouched. I knew then that if I wanted to end this, I could not wait for justice to come to me. I had to create myself. Something inside me shifted, and the fear began to burn into resolve. I whispered to myself, she thinks she can come and go as she pleases, and let her come, because the next time she touches my door, she will not walk away clean. And in that moment, the seed of a plan took root, a plan, simple and brilliant, a plan that would expose her lies, a plan that would paint the truth in colors no one could ignore. That was the night I stopped being her victim. That was the night I decided if she wanted to keep barging into my house, she would leave marked forever I woke up the next morning with a weight pressing against my chest, the anger from the night before had not faded. If anything, it had sharpened into something colder. I moved through my kitchen making coffee, but every sound seemed too loud. Every creak of the floor reminded me that Kerren had walked these same steps uninvited. She was in my space. She had left her fingerprints on my piece, and I could not let that continue. I tried once more to handle things the civil way. I crossed the street that afternoon and knocked on her door. She opened it with that smug tilt of her head, her pink jogging suit brighter than the sun. I told her calmly that what she was doing had to stop, that breaking into my home was a crime, not a neighborhood hobby. She laughed a thin, sharp laugh, like glass cracking. She told me I should be grateful she was keeping an eye on things. She said if I had nothing to hide, I should not mind her checking. My fists clenched, but I kept my voice steady. I told her if she stepped onto my porch again, I would involve police for real this time. She leaned against the doorframe, crossed her arms, and whispered, "You already tried that." And they believed me, not you. Then she closed the door, slowly savoring her last glance of victory. Days passed, and she grew bolder. She walked across my yard in plain daylight, tossing her trash into my bin. She stood on my porch, talking loudly on the phone, pretending not to see the camera lens glaring at her. When I confronted her again, she told me the footage meant nothing. She had already convinced people I was unstable, that I was harassing her. I could see it in the glances of some neighbors' suspicion in their eyes, as if I were the one causing trouble. I realized the camera was useless because she knew how to play her role. She blocked it with her purse, once smeared something on the lens. Another time, she was careful and cruel, and she knew how to twist perception. Every attempt I made to protect myself only seemed to feed her game. The breaking point came one Friday evening. I came home to find trash scattered across my porch, chicken bones, paper bags, empty soda. Ken's deliberately dumped her voice rang from the sidewalk. When I looked up, she said loud enough for the block to hear, "Maybe if you kept your property clean, the rest of us would not have to step in." Laughter followed her words, sharp and mocking. Her eyes challenged me, daring me to respond, daring me to lose control so she could wear the crown of the victim again. That night I sat alone on the couch, the house dark. Except for the street light bleeding through the blinds, my mind replayed every moment, every insult, every intrusion. And then something shifted. I realized Kerren was not strong. She was predictable. She moved with arrogance because she thought she could never be touched. But arrogance is its own weakness. It blinds people to the traps they walk into. I began to think of ways to fight back, not with fists, not with shouts, but with something she could never explain away. I needed something undeniable, something that would stain her the way her actions had stained my life. I thought alarms, locks, tripwires, each idea discarded. Because they could be explained or erased, then my eyes fell on the corner of the garage where a can of bright blue paint sat unopened from an old project. The sight of it made my lips curl into the first smile I had worn in weeks. Blue paint, bright, bold, impossible to ignore the perfect answer. She could talk her way out of words. She could twist stories, but she could not argue with color dripping down her clothes. I imagined her storming to my door, only to leave covered in it a walking canvas of her own crime. I spent the next day preparing. I tested the thickness of the paint, making sure it was sticky enough to cling. I rigged the doorframe with a careful hand, setting the trap where only a thief would trigger. My heart pounded with each step. But it was not fear this time, it was anticipation. It was a thrill of knowing that justice was finally within my control. When I finished, I stood back and admired my work. The door looked the same, ordinary, unassuming. But hidden within was a truth waiting to burst out. I whispered to myself, let her come one more time, just one more time. That night, I barely slept. I sat by the window, the lights off the street, silent. I could hear the faint hum of insects outside, the occasional rustle of leaves. Every sound made my pulse quicken. Every shadow across the pavement made me tense. I was a hunter, now waiting for the trespasser to step into the snare. Hours stretched on until the soft creak came again. The sound that had haunted me now made my heart race with anticipation. I leaned forward, my breast shallow. A figure moved across the porch, slow, deliberate, the purse, the jogging suit, the arrogance, all of it unmistakable. She reached for my doorknob. As if she were entitled to it, she twisted. And I waited, poised, silent, watching, knowing that this time she would not leave the same as she arrived. The knob turned slowly, the hinge groaned, and then the sound came, a wet, violent splash followed by a shriek that tore through the quiet night. I leaned forward, eyes wide, heart pounding, as Kerren staggered back where her once bright pink suit, now drenched in thick blue paint, it clung to her hair, dripped down her cheeks, and pulled at her feet. She looked like a character pulled from a nightmare, wild eyes, wide mouth open, as if the world itself had betrayed her. Her scream carried down the streetlights, flicked on one by one doors, open neighbors stepping out onto porches to see what chaos had erupted. She spun in circles, flailing her arms blue droplets, sprang across the porch like confetti at a parade. Only this was no celebration. This was justice. I stepped out from the shadows, phone in hand, recording every second. My voice did not rise above a calm, steady tone. Kerren, you have been trespassing in my house over and over now. The whole neighborhood can see for what you are. She froze at the sound of my voice, her eyes narrowing even as blue paint streamed down her face. She tried to speak, but every word came out broken, drowned by her own humiliation. The neighbors whispered, some gasped, a few even chuckled at the sight. She raised her arms, pleading, no, no, this is a setup. He attacked me. He put this on me. But the evidence was painted across her body, undeniable, unshakable. She could not twist this. She could not cry her way out anymore. She stumbled into the street, desperate to wash herself clean of the Shame garden hose sprayed somewhere down the block, and she ran toward it. But the water only smeared the paint deeper, turning her into a dripping caricature. Her cries echoed, I will call the police. I will sue you. You will pay for this. But for the first time, it was not me who looked guilty. It was her. She was caught her own arrogance, and I had the proof. My phone captured every second, the way she touched my doorknob, the way she pulled it open, the way the paint poured over her like judgment-made liquid. When the police finally arrived, her voice cracked as she tried to spin her usual story. But the officers did not look at me this time. They looked at her dripping, stained, shaking. The video rolled on my phone, and a crowd of neighbors that had gathered left no room for her excuses. Her empire of lies crumbled beneath the weight of evidence. They cited her for trespassing and warned of charges to come. Her reputation collapsed in a single night. No longer the neighborhood guardian, no longer the self-appointed savior of the block. Now she was just a woman who could not keep her hands off another man's door. A woman remembered not for her complaints, but for the blue paint that exposed her. In the days that followed the video I uploaded spread faster than I imagined. Memes of her screaming circulated online. Her painted figure looped to music remixed into jokes flooded every platform. People who had never met her laughed, cheered, celebrated the moment. Justice was delivered in such a simple, undeniable way. The title said it all. Racist Kerren caught breaking and gets painted blue. I walked outside one morning a week later and found her passing on the other side of the street. Her clothes hung darker now, as if she avoided bright colors. Forever her hair still faintly tinted with streaks she could not scrub out. She kept her head down, did not glance my way, muttered curses under her breath like broken prayers. I felt no fear, no anger, only a strange, calm justice. Had not come from the system. It had come from me, from the decision to fight back, not with violence, but with truth painted so boldly it could not be erased. They say revenge leaves a bitter taste, but this was not revenge. This was balance. This was her arrogance finally meeting consequence. And every time I look at that doorframe, I remember the moment her laughter was replaced by a scream, the moment the neighborhood saw her for what she truly was. I lock my door at night. I draw the blinds, but now, when I hear the creak of the porch, it no longer fills me with dread. It fills me with memory, the reminder that some people cannot be reasoned with. Some people only learn when their actions stain them so deeply the world finally notices. And if I ever doubt that justice exists, I just have to recall the sight of her running down the street, dripping blue paint under the glow of the streetlight, like a warning sign painted by her own hands. The days after blue paint incident felt like the shifting of seasons. The air, lighter the shadows, shorter. My home was finally mine again. But the echoes of what Kerren had done still lingered in the corners of my mind. She had been humiliated. Yes, her reputation shredded, her voice silenced in the neighborhood meetings. But her presence had not vanished entirely. She walked slower, now quieter, her pink outfits replaced by muted tones. Her once proud stride bent into a shuffle. Yet every time I saw her, I felt the reminder of what it meant to fight for peace in a place where some people thought peace was theirs alone to grant. I remember one morning stepping outside to pick up the newspaper and seeing her across the street. She froze the way an animal freezes when it realizes it is no longer the hunter. Her eyes darted down, her lips moved though no words came, and she turned away. I could almost hear the silence scream louder than her insults. Once that she was broken by her own arrogance, but she was still there, and her shadow still stretched across my days. Inside, I wrestled with the truth of it all. Part of me wanted to forgive her, to let the memory fade to nothing. Another part of me remembered every slur, every intrusion, every time I felt small in my own home. That part refused to let go. It whispered that people like her did not learn from kindness, only from consequence. And I realized in the battle was not only with her, but with myself. What kind of man did I want to be in the aftermath of victory? Neighbors who once looked at me with suspicion now nodded, waved, even stopped to talk in the yard. Some admitted they had believed her lies until the video showed them what she truly was. Others simply offered silent respect. I accepted their words. But inside I knew how fragile it all had been. My home, my dignity, all of it had been at risk because one woman decided she could rewrite reality. And I swore never again would I allow anyone to twist truth in such a way. Then came the meeting with the HOA. Place I once dreaded became a stage where justice was finally acknowledged. Kerren sat at the far end of the table, shoulders hunched, hair still faintly tinted blue. The president cleared his throat and read the charges of repeated harassment and trespassing. She tried to speak, her voice trembling, but every word crumbled under the weight of evidence. The video played again, projected larger than life, her soaked figure frozen forever in shame. No one laughed this time. The room was quiet, heavy with the gravity of her downfall. She was fined, stripped of her voting rights, suspended from committees. She would never again hold power in the neighborhood she once controlled with fear. I walked out of that meeting feeling the shift inside me. I was not just a man she had targeted. I was a man who had endured the storm and still stood tall. But I knew she was not finished entirely. People like her rarely are. They linger like stains even after the color fades. One night, weeks later, I caught her staring at my house from across the street, her face pale, washed in the glow of the streetlight. She did not move, did not shout. She simply stared as though trying to summon the courage to reclaim something she had lost. I stood on my porch watching her, my phone in hand. Though I did not lift it, she was powerless now, but the memory of her power still whispered in the silence. She turned away, finally walking into the darkness, leaving me alone with the cool night air. That was the moment I understood the climax of it all. The paint, the video, the humiliation. Those were not the true victory. The real triumph was a reclamation of my life, my peace, my control over my story. She had tried to write me out, to cast me as a stranger in my own home, and I had written myself back in with bold strokes. I walked inside, closed the door behind me, and for the first time in months, the sound of the lock clicking shut did not feel like desperation. It felt like choice, like power, like freedom. Kerren may never fully vanish. She may always linger at the edges of my story, a reminder the cruelty people are capable, but I had faced her, and I had not broken. I had turned her weapon against her and painted the truth for all to see. And as I stood there in the quiet of my home, I realized justice does not always come in the form we expect. Sometimes it arrives disguised as humiliation, dripping from the edges of arrogance. Sometimes it arrives in the color blue. And sometimes it arrives in the simple peace of knowing that when the door closes behind you, it is truly your door and no one else will ever claim it again.